Hi everyone, I'm Gordon Brickell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can subscribe at filmmakeru.com, and every week on Friday we have an event where people can chat with post-professionals. Today I'm joined by Peter Ettinger, editor and assistant editor for the Bourne Identity, Madagascar 3, and the Oscar-nominated If Anything Happens, I Love You, amongst so many other films. Hi Peter, welcome to the show.
Hi, Gordon. Good morning. How are you?
Pretty good, thanks. Now, I really want to ask you a question about Fast and the Furious. um, did they know what they had when they were working on it? And did you ever think that some people stealing DVD players would go on to become international espionage type superheroes?
I think it all starts with stealing DVD players, and pirating of movies has always been a problem. So the director, Rob Cohen, was so confident in this movie, and the footage and the performances were just bananas. But it had a heart at it, which I think connected with audiences. So I can tell you the first audience preview screening that was held, it scored a 94, which is unheard of, and immediately greenlit the sequel that week. Wow. So in a sense, yes, they knew what they had. I don't think they knew what they had in terms of where it ultimately went. I think they were just happy. Oh yeah, we'll make a sequel and it'll be great.
Now you've worked a lot in live fiction, I guess you could say, but also animated. So I'm wondering, what are some of the challenges in editing animation that people might not be aware of?
Well, in live action, you get the footage that's shot, and obviously you have dialogue and a certain amount of sound to work with, and you edit the movie that's been shot. Animation, you shoot the movie that you edit. So editing starts right at the beginning with storyboard animatics. We build the dialogue performances in terms of its rhythm, build all the sound effects because there's nothing there. So our timelines are insanely deep with music and sound effects and dialogue tracks. So the challenge is it's a lot more labor intensive that people don't necessarily understand. And the amount of time that it takes to get these movies done is years, as opposed to, maybe a year on a live action movie.
What is the working relationship like between you and the animators? Because I think about the rhythms and the pacing, and how do you tackle that when you have third parties, in a sense, helping dictate that?
So editorial is the main hub, and we start cutting the rhythm of the dialogue and the sound effects in animatic form. That gets turned over in a 2D project, that gets turned over directly to the animators. And so oftentimes they're locked into the pace that we've established with the director. So within that, they're allowed the parameters to create rhythm of their own within that timing. Sometimes they'll look at it and say, hey, we want this character to do this extra little antic. Can we have 8 frames at the tail of this? And so there's that back and forth. It's like, oh yeah, totally. But for the most part, editorial in conjunction with the director establishes the timing, the overall timing and pace of each scene, and ultimately the whole movie.
So when you get I guess the voice takes, or the voice work, how much editing up of those voice takes do you do? Like, I think about like I've talked to some people from Pixar, and they've gone down to like editing syllables to recreate the take. What was your approach for editing them?
So a long time ago, when I first started out, I worked for an editor named Maisie Hoy, and she taught me that an editor's job while watching dailies isn't to watch the dailies, it's to listen to dailies. The DP and the director, they can watch for any visual flaws, but the editor needs to listen to performance, because if there's a shot where the boom mic has dropped into frame, a lesser editor might dismiss that take altogether. But if you're listening for performance, you could use that performance on an over the shoulder. So she started to train me in terms of listening for performance early on, which is exactly what animation is all about, listening for performance. So if you're lucky enough to get a performance all in one take, in one line, that's great. But then you also have to listen for nuances of other takes and think, oh yeah, okay, there's a little bit more emphasis on this word in this take, and find a way to cut them together. So you could, depending on the quality of the records, which is often great these days, you could have a line of dialogue that was recorded months apart and it just sounds seamless. So I think there's a certain amount of magic to that and fun to discover that.
Is there a particular scene in one of your animated works that was difficult to bring together, but you're really proud of now?
Well, yes. On the current movie that I'm working on, I don't know how much I can talk about it, but I'll just talk in generalities. Sometimes when you work with a child actor and that child actor starts off very young and then starts to grow and mature, the voice quality starts to change over time. So to be able to weave a performance that sounds younger from a year and a half ago to something that was recorded present day, it's a little bit of a challenge. You can pitch things up a little bit electronically and make it seamless. So I think in the Loud House movie, which is going to come out on Netflix this year, there is a little bit of that. And maybe next time we talk, I can talk you through a little bit about what I had to do there.
Now you oversaw the Star Wars Special Edition Trilogy release. What was your role in supervising like that? What were you responsible for?
So it was a program for LucasFilm called the Theater Alignment Program, and it was all about doing print QC and checking for release prints or special prints for screenings. I started off doing the job. I was young, so I could do the midnight shift. So anytime my boss called me and said, hey, we need you to go to Technicolor, and can you watch whatever movie from midnight to 8 a.m. So I was like, yeah, sure. So I became known as the available guy. And as the reward, they said, we are going to be doing the Star Wars Special Edition. We would like you to supervise this. I was like, yeah, cool. It's like, you'll be going to Rome. Cool. All right. So got to watch all different languages of these prints. And film labs don't generally like people peeking over their shoulder. So I was the enemy to a certain, because I was, judging their work. But ultimately it turned out to be a great experience. And even at that late stage, I mean, the mix is done, everything is done. We're just QCing prints. There was an instance where in the Hungarian version of Empire Strikes Back, they had forgotten Darth Vader's breathing. And I hadn't caught on to it. I said, there's something missing here. There's something missing. And then all of a sudden, wait, the breathing. So they had to go back in and add Darth Vader's breathing. So, even at the very last minute, there's things to catch.
So now you're watching the whole thing. You're not just skipping through here.
This is on film.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm watching reel at a time.
How are you sick of Star Wars? Or are you like, because now you can be like, I've seen it in Hungarian, I've seen it in German, I've seen it. You've probably seen it more than many of the fans. So how do you feel about the new Star Wars? Do you even go to them, or are you just like, I can't?
It took a while. I guess it's like, if you work at a fast food restaurant, the last thing you want to eat is a cheeseburger after flipping burgers for 8 hours a day. Yeah. I did have to take a break, but I do consider myself still a fan. And so my heart goes to the original trilogy, though.
Oh yeah, which one in the original trilogy is your go-to?
I'm going to be controversial, and I'm going to say the first one.
Really?
Yep.
Why is that controversial? I know a lot of people love the second one, and I know the third one's not as loved.
Yeah, I think for me it kicked it all off, and delving into it later in life as a filmmaker and reading all the stories about how it came together and what a struggle it was on a $10 million budget to arrive at what they arrived at the time was a monumental achievement and so inspiring.
Yeah. Well, and you've mentioned film as a filmmaker, you've directed some films. So what did you take from the editing room that you used on set?
Racing against the clock and being able to beat the clock and knowing what coverage is necessary, what's not necessary, how to combine setups. You know, I had a shot list and I thought I needed 7 shots, but as time is running out, you realize, oh, you know what? I could do this in 4 shots and then get ahead in the day. So that was a great thing to have in my toolkit. Got me out of a lot of pickles because the movie I shot was it was a 20-day shoot. So we were fast and furious. Haha. And, but we got it done. We got it done on time and on budget.
What did you take anything from what Maisie Hoy said with regards to the actor's delivery? Like, how did you work with the actors?
Well, luckily I had veteran actors, Robert Patrick, Joe Mantegna, Jay Moore. So even just those 3 guys, there's 3 totally different backgrounds. You've got a method actor, you've got a stand-up comic, and then you've got a guy who's just very naturalistic. So you have to make it comfortable for all of them and figure out, okay, Jay will read the script 5 minutes before rolling camera and he'll have it. No rehearsal, no no memorization of the lines. And he's a 2-take guy, pretty much maximum. Maybe you could squeeze a 3rd take out of him.
Is that because he's just like, he's done with it? Or is it just
No, not necessarily. He's nailed it. Because being a comic and being in front of an audience, he's got that immediate instinct. Mm-hmm. And so you want to capture that in the moment versus another actor who might need to rehearse and test things out and try alternatives and really hone it in and find the performance. Jay's like, okay, I got it.
What about the others? Because you were sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no.
You were saying because there was one that was method acting, there was another. So how did you approach balancing these 3?
Well, for instance, Robert Patrick, he was playing a 70-year-old Elvis. So we had him in prosthetic makeup. So he was in the chair for 4 hours a day before even getting to set. And in the story, he is known as Mr. Aaron because we haven't established yet exactly that he's Elvis, who's still alive. His request that everybody honored was every time he was on set, he was to be referred to as Mr. Aaron. So that was his mode of always living in the character, even first sitting down into the makeup chair, and that transformation as the prosthetics went on, he became Mr. Aaron, and he was Mr. Aaron for 12 hours that day.
Oh, wow. Now, what would you say was, I guess, in your career, is there a scene or a moment that you've cut or directed that you're most proud of, or you like to show as like the pinnacle of your work?
I think one of the things from Smallfoot was, so Migo is this Yeti who lives at the top of the Himalayas, and he believes that the Smallfoot, i.e. humans, are real. And he has to leave the top of the mountain to go prove his theory. Well, he falls off the mountain. And in animation editing, which the great thing about it is if you want to try something, you can kludge together materials and do it and show it. So I thought it'd be funny to have him fall and then just go to an extreme wide shot with the mountain and just see this little tiny Yeti yelling down the mountain, mm-hmm. which got a big laugh. But then you keep it going, and then he stops yelling, takes a big inhale and then keeps yelling. And that just, it led to, luckily we were pre-COVID, so we could see this in the theater, but it led to 2 big laughs because it was almost an unexpected second laugh out of just that one shot. So I thought that was kind of successful.
Well, it made it into the movie, so
it made it into the trailer too. So
yeah. Which unfortunately ruins the joke.
Exactly. However, even though people had seen it going to the theater, people still laughed at it, even though it was spoiled. So
how do you work with the screenings? Because I've heard some editors love them, some editors find them are almost cantankerous towards them because they're frustrated with them. How do you utilize them as a tool for you as a storyteller?
Certainly in comedy, I think it's important because you get to know where the laughs are. And there have been times, even in Smallfoot, where a laugh has happened and I've moved on to the next thing too fast. And that old adage of pause for laughter is true, because there might be information on the other side of it that gets lost because people are laughing. So you have to allow people the time to laugh. So preview audiences are invaluable for that, because on the flip side, we've seen it so many times and it becomes unfunny to us. And there's that temptation to, let's just get on with it,
Yeah.
But audiences are coming into it fresh. It's going to live as an entertainment experience. So you have to allow that time.
As in terms of comedy, do you like it when people ad lib? You know how the Judge Apatow they would be firing off different lines, or do you prefer when they follow the script from an editing standpoint?
I think if they're good at improv, there's a lot of gold to be mined out of that. I think it's good that the actors are allowed that space. The key, though, is to, in those improv sessions that are just recorded wide open, is to keep an ear out for the threads or the seeds that are planted within that improv. And so in that moment, be able to say, oh, you started down the line with this, but you didn't finish that thought. But if you finished this thought, it could tie together with this other thing down the line in the movie. So you always have to have this macro view of the records and also a micro for each moment.
Interesting. Now, I have one last question that I like to ask everyone I interview. We've been in COVID for quite a while now. Is there a show or movie that you streamed that you think everyone should check out?
Recently, Behind Her Eyes.
What's that about?
Just phenomenal. Well, what is it about? A woman has a brief romantic encounter with a man in a bar who turns out he's her new boss at work.
Oh, okay.
But that's not even what it's about. It's just, you just got to watch it.
Okay.
If Anything Happens, I Love You is an animated short about 2 parents grieving the loss of their daughter due to a tragic event, which happens to be a school shooting. Marianne Garger, the producer, asked me if I wanted to cut a short, and I was just coming off of Smallfoot, and I thought, oh yeah, perfect timing. I have some free time. She introduced me to the directors, Michael Govier and Will McCormack, and they showed me a rough animatic that they had already done, and it was just so powerful and emotional. So just on nights and weekends, I worked on it, and it was hand-drawn 2D, very simple, but very emotional and very powerful. One of the things that I brought to it was I wanted to create a sense of unease through editing. So in the early part of the movie where things are a little bit uncomfortable between the couple and you don't quite know what's going on, I cut away a little bit earlier than you normally would, just to get a sense of something's not quite right here. But then as they remember back to better times, linger on shots a little bit longer to allow that emotional connection between the characters, between the audience and the characters to establish itself. So it was just this little handmade film that we just wanted to make a movie. And all of a sudden it got into a film festival. Hey, yay. Got into a bunch of film festivals. It started winning film festivals. Then suddenly Netflix wanted it. And then all of a sudden it's nominated for an Oscar. So one of the other crazy things was it got picked up by TikTok. There became a TikTok challenge where people would film themselves before they watched it, during watching it, and after watching it. And there's not a dry eye in the house. Yeah. It's just, it's hit on such a visceral level.
Well, especially with everything happening in the States. I mean, just yesterday, there was another shooting. How, like, because you're coming out of things like Smallfoot, which are comedy based.
Mm-hmm.
How do you shift your gears to get into something this heavy in that sense? Yeah, for lack of a better term.
I think oftentimes editors might be painted as being genre editors, which is great. If you're a comedy editor and that's what you do and you do it to the best you can, that's awesome. Within animated movies, there's already many different genres that you're cutting. So even in a Smallfoot, I'm cutting an action movie, I'm cutting a musical, I'm cutting comedy, I'm cutting drama. So to transition into a heavy piece like If Anything Happens, I Love You, it is challenging, but it's also, it all goes back to character and emotion. So you're cutting for the emotion of the moment and what the reaction is and should be intended. So if you're cutting a comedy and you're cutting for the laugh, make sure you cut for the laugh. In this, to be honest though, with If Anything Happens, it was less, for lack of a better word, contrived or feeling like I was trying to pull people's heartstrings. It's just the way the animation was and how we were working with it. It just became this organic process to find these moments. And it was, I don't know, I have to always step back and be the audience, even though I'm the one who's mechanically putting things together. I have to sit back, and if it's affecting me, then hopefully it's going to affect an audience. So there were many times where I would, at the end of the day, sit back and watch it, and I'd just start crying because it is heavy, but I think it's an important film for people to watch, and you should watch it.
Why do you think they chose animation as opposed to live action?
They started with the idea of making an animated short as a meditation on grief. So that's where they came from. Then as news events, Sandy Hook, Parkland, things were fresh in people's minds, they realized, maybe the school shooting would be the tragic event that we can touch on. What was great about doing it as an animated film is its simplicity and almost what the audience can project onto it. There's a lot of sparse scenes, things revealed only when need to be revealed. There's the characters, the mother and father character, they have these shadows that appear. And so we're seeing these shadows interact in a way that the characters themselves can't interact with each other because they're going through this grief. So that was a nice idea that probably played really well into having it executed in animation. I was just trying to think in my mind of how would you do that in live action? I think you would have to do some sort of animation.
Yeah.
Anyway, obviously.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much for letting me interview.
Thank you.
Check that out.
Yeah, please do. And thank you for all that you're doing, your program and the people that you have on here. It's amazing. So
thank you.